Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hospitality Huddles. I have just taught Bal the secret of why you clap before you go on air to help with the editing. So if I started talking too quick and you're watching this on YouTube, now you know why we were both laughing and I clapped beforehand. Anyway, let's get on with the episode. Today, Bal, we are going to talk about purchasing and buying in or producing in-house. And I think this is an interesting one because in the past, especially in hotels, and I know from a QSR background, you've always kind of challenged this, but in hotels, it was always we make everything in house. That's our USP. We've got loads of chefs, like we can do everything. But I think with the current market, where labour is increasing. We've obviously had the nice news in the recent budget here in the UK, which has made that more difficult. In the in the US, minimum wage is going up to levels that are kind of challenging labour cost and operational efficiency. We've got talent shortage, skill shortage, all the things that we hear in the news. I think now's the time where we should be challenging how much do we have conversations with suppliers about things that might have traditionally been done in-house being done outside and bought in, because I think there's real mass to be done now around the price to buy in prepped items versus doing it in-house. And when we want to talk about this is more in the line of banqueting operations, casual dining operations, maybe in your bar food, your room service. Clearly, if you have Michelin star restaurants and things like that, it's a different environment. But in a general day-to-day hotel operation, is buying in a better option? And this is talking about things like, do we get in meats pre-trimmed? Do we get in chicken pre already boned? Do we get in chopped onions and garlic and things like that then we can use like the scoot system and what have you that makes it easier? I think if you do the maths between food cost versus labor, and you weigh it up, I think you'd probably find that it comes in more efficient to buy in. And I think you're going to get a lot more efficiency on prepping and labor challenges and putting people where it counts, which is cooking the food for the guest in the end, rather than sitting there chopping onions and bits and pieces like that. So that's what I want to cover today. And it's going to be a bit of an opinion one, this one, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
it really is hypothetical to an extent. But what's your take on buying in versus producing in house? And I guess, some of the experience that you had with McDonald's, Shake Shack by Chloe, etc. as well.
Yeah, listen, McDonald's is an anomaly because they got like they got the volumes. So it doesn't matter. You've got buying power, you've got volumes, and you can say, I'm not gonna take a crate of tomatoes off you prepped. But they're talking thousands.
Mm.
So that's an anomaly. And ever since I can remember, um, they always bought in prepped items. Fast forward, more recently when we did buy Chloe, I think we tend to do a lot of prep in by Chloe, and it was already a fairly labor-intensive operation. At the point I think I'm trying to make is it depends on your operation and what you want to use them items for. If you're going to get two prep chefs to cut 50 kilos of onions and you're batching something, I think it makes sense at all. Really.
Mm.
You just buy the chopped onions and you don't have two chefs prepping them onions, 50 kilos of onions, even if it's in a dicer. Um, and then if it's a low volume um, operation, it's a very fine balance to go like, okay, am I going to buy in a prepped item, which is probably I can get unprepped 15-20% cheaper, maybe? Or do I say I want to save myself 30 minutes because I've only got two people in for the whole day who are cooking in the kitchen?
But if I stop you on that, then so say take onions for an example, right?
Yeah.
And you're paying. and this is hypothetical. So if you do
Yeah.
actually know what you're paying for a kilo of onions right now, don't
Yeah.
like challenge me on it. But say you're paying 10 quid, right, for a kilo of
Yeah.
onions, and you're paying, I don't know, 15 quid, for example,
Mm.
for a kilo of chopped onions. Yeah. Take that £10 for your kilo unprepped and say to chop that, dice it, do it properly, it's going to take 30 minutes. Yeah. And the average entry level chef that might be doing it now is on 13, £14 an hour. So that's £7 an hour plus. And that's if you have the commis chefs to do it now. You might be chef de parties and all that, and it might be higher, right? And then not to mention that, but then you've got the waste collection because now you're putting the off cuttings in the waste bin, which is adding to the waste, and you've got the waste collection. On very simple maths, when you start looking at it in that perspective, all of a sudden the chopped one isn't more expensive anymore because the hourly labor cost is getting to a point now where it's outdoing a machine on scale chopping all those onions into a bag that's on a factory line and all the rest of it. And I think yes, there's bits where that's ambiguous, like chopping a tomato or chopping herbs and things like that. But certain things, I what you're saying there, even on simple maths, would say it's definitely worth challenging in-house versus production.
100%. And that's where the thing is. That's where the fine balance is. The psychology of the independent operator is, hang on, I'm paying 15% more. Um, where we would go, as you've just broken it down, okay, what's it cost a kilo? Okay,
Mm.
how long does it take me? What's that labor? What's the wastage? What am I going to lose? That independent guy or girl, they're not thinking like they're thinking it's cheaper. Bang.
But
So
then
it's
do you
about.
think this is some of that where when I was in San Antonio, a friend of mine, Monty Silva, he was doing a talk on profitability. And one
Mhm.
of his messages on profitability is you shouldn't manage profit through percentages because if you do, you're getting too hung up on a theoretical number to an extent and not on physical cash. And you can't take a percentage to a bank, but you can take cash to a bank. So if you start getting too hung up on percentages, are you actually impacting cash flow? So is some of this the thing of like you look at it today and go, okay, I've always had a 24% food cost, for example. I know that many people do. So say 30% food cost, right? With the recent thing that's coming in the UK, especially, and I was having this conversation yesterday with Mike Gove from Hot Stats and some guys from Integra, and we were having a conversation there, going, okay, it's not just the hotel employers' national insurance and costs that are going to go up; it's the suppliers and everyone else's, right? In a factory operation, because they're doing scale, the efficiency on that increase in that person's employer's NI is a lot less over the bags of stuff that they're producing than one individual chopping it in a hotel, right? So in terms of that like basic economics, it comes in cheaper. But it's one of those, isn't it, where it's like it's gonna when you're managing on percentages, you look at it and go, okay, your percentage is going to increase anyway because you can't keep compromising to keep it at 30%. So if you increase your food cost, you're not going to reduce any other lines. But if you look at this in terms of going, okay, we might be increasing our food cost by 2%, but we're going to bring our labor cost down by 2%. And we're going to save on some wastage because we're not going to send stuff to the trash as quickly because we're not throwing stuff away. Suddenly, when you start doing those maths and you go, actually, let's look at numbers and impacting pounds, dollars, euros, whatever it might be, actually that percentage being 33% might actually be a better impact on your business than anything else. And I think, um, Monty's thing was right in terms of sometimes that theory is a bit antiquated because we're in a money game right now and we should be looking at pound and pence impact rather than
Not chasing
percentage
market.
impact,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's kind of where you were kind of saying with that as well is yeah, it's definitely a difference, isn't it?
Yeah, when we're looking at like what we're working on predominantly the hotel world, banqueting, conferencing. It's just like there's no question
Mm.
in my mind. I will never have prep chefs chopping 50 kilos of onions
No.
because you've got a wedding of 200.
Mm.
I just wouldn't do it because if it's integral to how that dish looks, you know, and it has to be the perfectly kind of round shallot pickled, and it's a garnish, yes, it's different. But even that, I'm sure you can, depending on how many you're doing, you can get them done well. So like banqueting, meetings and events, weddings, this kind of high volume operation in a hotel, buy in.
Mm. Mm.
Honestly, buy it in.
That's true,
You're not
right?
worrying about wastage. You're not telling your receiver or your cost controller, oh, you need to put in a ratio, a weighting for wastage. Like you're not having them silly conversations with your manager about justifying that half a point.
Mm.
You know what I mean? That half a point. Um, I don't know. I would always buy in the
That's
model.
true. And then the last thing that I just want to touch on this, I think what the message for me is on this one is challenge. We're
Mm.
not saying do. We're not saying tomorrow go in and go to your chef, going, chef, you now have to buy in all your prep, what you're prepping, XYZ, right? You've got to buy it all in. Like, we're not saying that. What we're saying is you should look at what's being prepped in your business. That includes the bar, by the way.
Yeah,
The
100%.
bar is a big one, right? If people are sitting there juicing limes and lemons, the amount of like fresh lime and lemon juice you can buy in now is just not worth it whatsoever.
Yeah.
Um, go down everything that's being prepped in your business. Go to your purchasing guy and go, do me an exercise on in-house versus prepped, taking in these parameters. In-house is what's the food cost?
Mm.
What's the wastage opportunity or potential? What's the labor cost involved? And that's in minutes because you've got the hourly rate and you can divide it down. And what are the associated costs that go with it that might be challenging that? So if you're doing, um, I don't know, if you're doing onions, as we just said, you've got the wastage that comes from the skin and bits like that. Same with some of the vegetables and stuff. You've got some of that wastage. But again, like factor that in and then look at that versus buying in and just do the exercise. And maybe some might work out more expensive to buy in, but maybe some might be more efficient to do it as to do it in house. It's worth an exercise, and I think now it's there. I think the other thing that I just want to touch on before we move on, because I think the calculation bit is really important, is there's a reason why companies like or operators like McDonald's and Five Guys, Shake Shack, Leon, Pret, blah blah blah, all have central supply chain, right? And it's all around consistency and brand. From your background, do you want to just talk a little bit about that? Because again, as much as there's the efficiency element to this. There's also a quality and consistency element to it, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, yeah. Look, um, what we're not saying, I think, is you're not going to have quality issues. If you're having yield issues with your pre kind of made chopped items from the supplier, then there's a problem with what you're doing, right? But going back to my background, McDonald's, Subway, Shake Shack, we had to go on a journey with it because the where the brand came from is a Danny Meyer brand, and they like to do everything in house. Over the years, they've definitely moved everything over to buying in. They've got volume, all this sort of stuff. But in McDonald's, we had a labor constraint, shall I say, and it was also about being efficient, about how you're moving in your space, and everything had to be quick. When you're doing, I don't know, a few hundred burgers in an hour, in some cases thousands. What you can't be messing about is with onions and making sure they're prepped. Sometimes it used to be like dehydrated onions. You'll just set up in the morning, pot water, bring them to life, and then the others was like I know we keep going on onions, but it was with everything.
Mm.
Cheese. lettuce. The cheese was how it was layered. It was already portioned perfectly, and the size was perfect for the product, and then the pots they chose. Um, but in my background, them two brands, McDonald's and Subway, everything had to be made in that way because it ensured consistency. It took out the thinking. We could do massive volumes. So, like I spoke about massive volumes in banqueting and meetings and hotels and stuff. But them sort of volumes is definitely relatable.
Mm.
They're comparable for sure. Like one of our busiest subways, I think we had a record where we did 220 sandwiches in an hour.
Mm.
Like, and you can't be messing around with processing products, and it has to be easy to get it set up for that volume. So, and everything was bought in. Um, Quality, consistency, speed. Um, I don't know. Maybe it's my bias talking, maybe Scott, because that's in, I'm well bought into that method. Um, Especially like like I said, like my upbringing in the hospitality world.
Mm.
Um, but how will we adopt it into worlds where they don't know, or there's a maybe um a misconception about what that is? That's probably the challenge, I say.
Yeah, I think it is, but I think this is again, it's back to that bit, isn't it? Around we're living in a very, very different place than probably we were even before COVID, I guess. But definitely when I left hotels to go to independent restaurants 2015, totally different. And I think it's one where we need to evolve. I think F&B profitability is hard as it is in a restaurant high street. So we need to be looking at marginal gains. And I think, we've got to kind of push ego out of it. And listen, let's face it, fundamentally, if you're challenged with people, skill, talent, the last thing you want to do is be putting the shit with 50 kilos of onions to chop for your banqueting when you can make your life easy. And I think, my big message is the workforce of today want to be creative. They want to be creative. They want to be supercharging what probably would have been 5, 6 years previously, and they want to be cooking new dishes now and where the action happens. And they don't want to do the time in the back of house where there's no windows, in the prep side of the kitchen, chopping and trimming, and it's not what excites them. And I think that's the bit where you've got to allow them to be creative. And there's an element, even if you have people, are those people doing what they truly love and where they want to be that retains them in the business or retains them in the industry over a simple thing of this is the way we've always done it. And I think, as we do with a lot of what we talk about, is it's about thinking a little bit differently and challenging what we've always done to ask whether what we've always done is still relevant today. And I think that's probably the core message from this is if you're still listening to this now, if we haven't turned you off already, or you're a chef that's gone, we're never listening to those idiots again, is challenge what you're doing, challenge whether it's the right thing to do, challenge whether there's an easier way, challenge whether there's a cost efficient way. Because if you can save pennies and pounds in different places, you can put them where it really counts. And that's the message. I think this was a good one. I liked this. I think this was a good one.
It's like in today's place, like where our industry is, we're talking of skill shortages, we're talking of, like efficiencies. It's hard.
Yeah.
That food cost is hard. That like them lines on your P&L, they're hard.
Mm.
Um, and like you said, challenge all of it and go, okay. If you still don't agree and you don't want to do it, just do the exercise. And if you want to
100%.
ignore it, if it's in your favor or not, that's entirely the exercise, I think, is a must
Yeah.
for sure.
100%. Right. Thank you very much for joining us this week, everybody. Podcast at audenhospitality.com is where you can send us the topics that you want us to talk about. If you want us to talk about anything that's on there. And yeah, go and check out some of the other episodes on our YouTube channel at Auden Hospitality and Spotify, Apple Podcast for some of the other topics that we've talked about. What have we talked about before? We've done what's the scoop? We've done what equipment should you be buying? And
Spaces in hotels and how to
yeah,
use them.
zoning and stuff like that. That was a good one
Yep.
as well. So yeah, there's some really good topics on there. Out every Friday. Go and check them out. And Bal, thanks for that. Really good one.
See you later.